Dude, watch. All right, so welcome to a special...
Wait, what? Huh? I was not ready. I've not even seen it correctly.
Dude... Got your water.
I got my water.
Are you all set?
I'm all set.
We're leaving all that in there. All right. So welcome to our first in-person episode of the actual podcast. So we've been in person plenty of times before for our Smartwatch year in reviews, but this is the first time that we've ever done the podcast in person.
It is. This is somewhat kind of ironic and funny. Also interesting, is this actually the first time we will have something that will go live from your studio with both of us in it? Because remember, we filmed the Smartwatch year in review one year, but then we had to throw it away.
Correct. This will actually be the first time that we're doing a joint filming that's going to be published, actually.
Right.
Yeah, because we had to scrap one episode of the Smartwatch year in review completely. So this will be the first one.
I'm ready for it.
Yep, cool. So I guess first of all, we're in Colorado at my home, and I guess tell us why you're even here.
Yeah, so I'm on a tour. I'm on a world tour. I'm like Taylor Swift, except without the private jet. So I've been visiting a lot of companies on this. I posted like an Instagram teaser of the city names, right? See who can figure it out. But essentially, first up was visiting Garmin in Kansas, and then visiting you here. Yeah. I had actually, Des wasn't my first choice. I had actually already had something planned for Colorado, and then that product got shifted, we'll call it that. I was still going to visit Des either way, but this gave me more Des time. Right? We've had like 3 days now, so it's great.
Totally, yep. So far we've been doing a lot of testing on many things, and we've been doing a lot of climbing. Did you think this mountain biking was a little bit scary or no? Or
it was mostly the am I going to fall off the side of the mountain, basically. So like the trail itself wasn't bad, but I'm just not used to having like a plentiful amount of rocks in the trail in conjunction with the gigantic cliff off the side, right? And so that was the part that I was like, and also on a bike that's not mine, so I don't really know how it's going to react. I'm just like YOLO.
I did have to take him, so we did a pretty famous gravel ride today up to the Gold Hill General Store, if any of y'all know that, in Boulder County. It's this fun little general store up in the hills, like way out there. You have to do steep climbing to get there. Like there's no option.
It was 20% according to the
20%.
things.
I mean, I was like at a cadence of like 2,
I've got a picture that we'll put in right now that Des doesn't know I took, which is funny because the gravel was so clean that you can see his track, and he wasn't going straight up the hill. You see the track like this.
Yeah, exactly. But the famous thing at this Gold Hill General Store are these, they call them the cookie, and they're some of the best cookies I've ever had in my life. So,
it was very, very good.
Yeah, it's certainly worth the climb. So anyways, we're here right now doing a little pit stop. The next podcast after that is going to be a special other Apple podcast like WWDC. So that's going to be pretty cool.
That's the next stop on the Taylor Swift journey here.
Yeah, but let's get to sports tech.
Yeah.
So first up, what are we're going to talk about? Polar's Whoop strap. So this is
we have a lot of things.
Yeah, totally.
Also, why is your list different than my list?
No, this is an extended list that I did a little bit with extra bullet points and whatnot. It's really the same list, but see, I just added some stuff down here. So,
okay.
We're right here. We're good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I only asked because I put something at the very top. It's not there anymore.
You did?
I did, yeah. But it's all right. It's all right. It's not. It hasn't synced apparently. Okay. Well, the thing I put at the top, just as a quick notable,
what is the thing at the top?
Is that we I guess me technically, but either way, the DCR open house. Yeah. So that's coming up here July 13th, 14th, whatever the case is, you'll be able to find the link on dcrainmaker.com. So if you want to come to the DCR cave, which you've been to the open house many times.
I think I've been to every single one, actually.
I think so, yeah. It's a lot of fun. So you get to basically explore the entire DC Rainmaker cave, which is like 3,000 square feet, about 300 square meters of space as you see fit. You can jump on test bikes. You can jump on anything. We do a morning run. We're not going to do the bike ride for the summer one. We're just going to do the morning run because it's a little bit easier logistically. But the morning run, and then no people flying off into the cow fields this time. And then we do an evening event with free beer. We got a custom microbrew beer again, the same way.
Oh, nice. Yeah, very cool.
So anyways, it's totally free to come. You just have to sign up so we know how much beer to get.
And speaking of beer, this is going to be our first non-sober edition of the podcast as well. I mean, it'd be kind of weird to like drink like when you're in Amsterdam and I'm here. But, so this is going to be our first.
Would it be weird?
Well, it would be weird because we usually film at 8 a.m. my time.
That is true. That's a valid point.
So anyways, I broke out something special for you beer geeks out there, and hopefully some of you guys are watching on YouTube right now. But anyways, for those of you who are not, I really like beer quite a bit, and broke out a Pliny the Elder for Ray to try out. I think you and the girl have tried this maybe the last time.
It vaguely looks familiar to me.
I came over. So anyways, we got.
By the way, folks be appreciating the bottle opener there from Des, which is a crank arm.
Yes. So I was really so I used to work in bike shops quite a bit, and during the winter you get really, really bored. And so this is an old, not Ultegra, but Shimano 600. That's how old school this thing.
That's before the crank started breaking?
This is when they were accurate. Anyways, so this is an old Shimano 600 crank arm that I actually turned into a bottle opener by, I sat there with a file, literally like this.
You did that with a file?
I did this with a hand file. This took me like half a day to do. But anyways, I made it into a custom bottle opener, and That's
awesome.
So anyways, gotta love the bike stuff. And of course the DCR glass.
From the open house.
Yeah, are these still for sale?
We have them again for this open house. Open house, yeah. Right. So if you come there, it's a good time. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good time. So you get to see a whole bunch of just all the sports tech gadgets, like kind of all in one place, and you get to geek out with everyone else that just like has a passion for this stuff. So I highly recommend getting there, and good food, good beer. It's a good
It does sell out. Again, it's free, but it does sell out somewhat soon, just so keep that in mind if you're
what is it, like 200 people or so?
200 people we max it at, so the fire people don't get too upset with us.
Oh, okay.
So
got
that's
it.
The main
cool.
reason.
All right, so now that we have our beers, we got to do the clinkies really quick. That was a terrible.
That was a hold on. We got really clink.
All right.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like it, yeah.
Yeah, better for you.
Do we have to worry about the beer that got on the keyboard?
It's going to be fine.
Things just go everywhere.
All right. No, it's going to be okay. All right. So let's loop back to our second 1.5 topic here, being the Polar's Whoop-like strap. So this is just like a little strap that goes on the wrist, right? So it looks very much like a Whoop strap. However, and it does similar things, but there's one very different thing about it.
Very different thing is they're not going to sell it
to consumers.
And that's the kicker. So they've announced, like, this is something they put an entire website for, everything like that. This isn't like a leaked thing. Is their Polar 360 strap is what they're calling it, 360 band, and it looks identical. We'll put a picture on the screen here to a Whoop strap, but it's made by Polar, and it connects to the entire Polar Flow platform. So it's essentially the same metrics you would see on Whoop, except Polar's been doing this stuff for, frankly, a lot longer, and it goes into that Polar Flow platform. But as you noted, they're not planning on selling it to consumers. They want to sell it to two different types of businesses. One being like health-focused and corporation type stuff. So there's a lot of corporations that do health plans with Garmin and Apple and other companies where you can get like points for activities and things like that. So they have that side of it, and then they want to also OEM it, meaning they want to be able to rebrand it. So you and I, we could have like a branded version of it that is like the Fit file band, basically, right? That concept, but like similar to what Kodak does, right? Kodak doesn't technically exist as a company. They just license everything out. So the idea being that other likely, like, not necessarily straight fitness companies, but other maybe phone manufacturers, things like that want to get into that, can make this, and then they can either use Polar Flow's backend as is, like use it as the consumer opens up Polar Flow app, or behind the scenes they can use all the APIs and have their own, app. So they could have it like let's say the company called Pair buys it, right? A Pair app, and the Pair app then connects into this and shows all that same data.
I see this as a really big missed opportunity, though.
Massive.
I mean, I don't really understand, because Polar already has all of the physio algorithms and all that kind of stuff already built out. And I mean, I would assume that sensors are going to be very much the same as a watch, right?
Yep.
So why would they not just sell it?
Massive missed opportunity. And so here's 3 reasons why I think they've completely missed the boat on this, right? Number one, and I'm saying this like in hopes that they do this because it's good for you, Polar. Let's listen. That's the whole thing.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Not because you have a bad product. I think, one, you've actually got a really good product. Like, you're the only company in this potential space that I would say like you could actually trust. Like, in the sense that people know Polar's data is largely very good and backed by like decades of science behind this, versus a lot of the Whoop data can be iffy at best, especially around strain and recovery. Those 2 areas, especially strain, when you look at workouts and things like that, and how it calculates a lot of that stuff is iffy. And so Polar's is generally well trusted. Polar's one caveat here, though, is the fact that their app, I don't believe, is very awesome. It needs a little bit of love. Compared to Whoop's app is arguably their biggest strength. I think Whoop app is super well executed, super clear, so it'd be easy to understand. You don't get too lost in the weeds. But that's a app thing that frankly you can fix. Like, that's the least of the problems at this point, given they've already developed this hardware. Like, the hardware's done. It's just a matter. This wasn't like, again, it's not a leaked thing. This is, they're done. They're ready to integrate.
And that's really where I feel like the easy button's just there.
It's there.
Yeah.
Like, even if you went out today with the existing Polar Flow app and you're like, you know what, we're going to start here. Go for it. Like, it's the same data that someone buying a Polar, a mid-range Polar watch, like a $200 Polar watch would use. The exact same app, and people are mostly happy with that experience. So that's number one, is I think they've already had all the stuff done. Number 2 is that when it comes to the subscription model, right now, Whoop is subscription-based, and that's, of course, the biggest downside of it, is that people don't like that. Undoubtedly, I don't think Polar will go that direction because they don't have any sort of subscription platform built in place today.
Yeah, like payment mechanisms.
Right. So they probably just go with for sale, which would be great. You charge, let's say you charge $200 and $249, something like that for that, right? Which might seem high until you remember how much you pay for.
Yeah, but I think maybe that's the value proposition that they're having a hard time with, is selling a strap where, you look at comparable devices that are like similar-ish, like let's say like a Fitbit Charge 6, right? Something like that. That's like $150.
Yep.
And it does a lot more, in the sense that, so I wonder from Polar's standpoint, if to actually get the revenue they need, that, just selling the strap alone as a piece of hardware, maybe a consumer would be like, $250 for a strap? That's going to be tough, right?
But I think they can, which gets to my final point, I think they can win that on the comparison front, right? So here's why. If you look at Whoop, Whoop's entire business model is almost wholly built on fitness influencers, right? In the sense that they got to where they are through big name, we're talking like influencer in the like Huberman type realm, right? That sort of realm of people that are just going out there and, hawking this and getting tons of sponsored money for it, right? That's it. It is what it is. But it's also on the YouTube side as well, speaking of like a YouTube podcast, for people that are, reviewing the Whoop strap, but then of course have at the bottom the Whoop affiliate links and things like that and making money. All those people want something to compare it to, right? And from Polar's standpoint, the second there's a viable competitor to Whoop, the default and de facto thing that the Whoop strap's going to be compared to, both Whoop 4.0 and assuming the eventual 5.0, whatever they call the next strap, whenever that happens, would be Polar, right? That's like the de facto scenario. In the same way that if you have a GoPro action camera, or if you have a DJI or Insta360 action camera, you are by de facto going to compare it to a GoPro in any review out there.
Yeah.
And if Polar's the only other main-ish option, that's amazing free marketing, right? So that every one of those videos, even if the end of the video is recommending Whoop and the subscription fee because they get the kickbacks, people are still going to go, oh, it's cheaper to get this.
Well, and I think another part of the missed opportunity with Polar at this point is that their consumer-facing side of their business is, it's been struggling, I think. Because realistically, the only 2 new things that we've seen are the Grit X2 Pro and the Vantage V3, which obviously has had, mixed reactions, since it came out. Whereas something that may not be as well known about Polar is that they do a lot on the professional team sport side of things and a lot with businesses and stuff like that. And, I think that that's probably what's keeping their business going at this point. So, Sure, maybe it makes sense to keep on focusing on that, but at the same side, I think they need like a, kind of like a little turbo boost on the consumer end of things.
Especially given how low cost this would be for them to do. Like they've already made the unit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We know that the build costs for a Polar Band is going to be trivially low, right?
Yeah.
So it's really just printing cash at that point. If you're charging $250 for a strap pod sensor thing that probably has the same bill of materials as like a Polar Verity Sense-ish, give or take,
sure,
right? Which normally sells for 79 or so bucks. That means their cost of goods is in the tens of dollars, right? At best. You're talking massive profit there, and they don't have to do anything. Even if you ignore our comments around the app being not necessarily as awesome as Whoops, and you just say, done, we're just rolling it out today, it'll sell well.
Yeah.
Right? You have a good marketing story around that about how it's, you lean very heavy on the no subscription side, just like we saw Garmin do about 2 years ago, right? The whole concept of, we are not going to charge you a subscription fee for the data that you own, right? And if Polar leans hard on that, they're going to do really well.
Yeah, and the other portion about the selling the actual strap too is that, from an ecosystem standpoint, that's what keeps people brand loyal, really. And that's ultimately that's what keeps people loyal to Whoop, especially just because it does a really, really good app. And again, like, mixed reviews on the Polar app, but again, like, once you're in an ecosystem, it's harder to get out of that. And sure, they may not make the money that they really want to on like the strap hardware or something like that. However, that leads into that consumer or customer possibly buying a higher priced wearable, like one of their sports watches later on.
And there's so much potential too for targeting more of the athletic side of that as a starting point. Like all the people who want their sleep data and want their HRV status and all this stuff to get pushed to the Training Peaks of the world, right? That all can happen today versus on the Whoop side, those are very expensive API connections that Whoop charges us platforms for. Some people don't usually do that. Like, I don't know. I just think out of all the things I looked at Polar, when I first saw this, I'm like, holy shit, they get it. Right? Like, they've got this. They're going to do this. And then it's like, no, don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if they can actually backpedal on this at this point just because they have offered it to companies and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think, again, like, that's something that they should really revisit in terms of their strategy.
Yeah, I'd argue it's the most important business decision they can make for the health of the company going forward. Because I really struggle to see how Polar is going to continue to be competitive going forward after what we saw with the Grid X2 Pro.
Yeah.
So to me, this could be that thing that they could latch onto, and it could be like the start of the real true revival of the company, and really start to broaden their base of people that may not be aware of Polar, but this could kind of pull them in. Like the number of friends and family that ask me about the Whoop strap, and I'm kind of the point where I'm like, yeah, if you want it, go for it. I don't think accuracy is great in certain areas and things like that, but they do a good job in other stuff. If there was a Polar option there, I'd be like, get this because this is actually accurate. It's science based. It's all these sort of things. Like, please, Polar, just do it.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So next up, let's talk about Garmin's new firmware update stuff. Is how you put it on the list here. Firmware update stuff. That's how Ray put it on the list. So
isn't this your redone list?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, well, you did a video on this morning that's doing well, so you can talk about it.
Yeah, so Garmin just put out their press release for for all of these new software updates that just came out with for plenty of their devices, like pretty much all their top tier Phoenix 7s, Epix Pros, the Enduro 2 and the Tactics and all that kind of stuff, as well as plenty of their foreigners or all their current foreigners.
Yep.
So 165, 255, 265, 955, and 965, Venue 3, Vivo Active 5, as well as their Edge bike computers.
Yep.
So I think there's some really neat features in here. I think the highlight ones that I was particularly interested in were the lost phone finder, or a Find My Phone feature that actually uses GPS while you're in a GPS activity to go, it basically marks the location of your lost phone. So in let's say the scenario today, if there was actually cellular coverage, like up, where we were, let's say, when we got cookies today, like you accidentally left your phone there or something like that. When you got outside of Bluetooth range and your wearable or your wearable actually lost connection, it would actually alert you on the wrist and say, hey, your phone's lost at this point. So it would actually use the GPS on your watch, since it's tied together, to lead you back to your watch's location. I think that's, or your phone's location.
And it's cool because this has been like a bit of an iteration process of features over the last 8 months, because they started off with the notifications that you've disconnected and out of range, right? So, and it was only funny because the very first time I had that happen to me was actually on the running track, because I left my phone at the other end, at the start line, and each time I was at like the complete opposite end, it finally dropped the connection. Every single time. I remember saying some feedback over. I'm like, can we disable this for track mode maybe? Because it's just like loop, disable, like hard to disconnect. But it's a super cool feature. It's super logical. It's kind of that stuff that, again, you just... the number of times I've dropped my phone on trail running sometimes and not realized it until some period later when something disconnects and I get notified.
Totally.
This would be like super helpful for that.
Yep. And then the other navigation style feature that they launched, which I think is probably, I think arguably one of the most exciting features, is a pin drop navigation feature that you can use with Apple Maps on an iPhone. And basically you can find any location, point of interest, like a restaurant or bakery or something like that within Apple Maps. Just use the native share function and then share that with the Garmin Connect app, and it just immediately pops up on your watch or your Edge bike computer. And then it does basically on the fly navigation to that location. And the neat thing is that it allows you to actually choose the specific sport profile that you want to use, and it will create the on-the-fly turn-by-turn directions based on that profile. So if if you want to walk there, it'll give you walking specific directions, and if you want to bike there, it'll give you biking specific directions. And this is where it does require one of their devices that does have full mapping because of that automatic calculation.
No, I think it's pretty handy to just, because again, if you're on an Edge device and trying to put an address in or something like that, it's no one actually does that.
Well, and a watch, I mean, good luck. I mean, it's terrible. Now, obviously that
would be like a really fun, like, drunk games test. Right?
Well,
like two people with the watch and have to like get a flashcard of addresses and have to see who can get the address location in first on the watch.
No, but we actually did have to do this though. Do you remember? When we were in Chamonix. So we were doing the
the brewery. Yeah, we did the brewery. Right?
So fun story. So we had planned out, I don't know, it was like a 20-mile hike or something like that. Our plans never ever go to. So anyways, we planned out this huge hike. Midway through, we were like, there's no way we'll make it before actually nightfall. And
there was a thunderstorm coming in that was looking pretty nasty for
it was, And so we actually had to use the search location feature on my Phoenix 6 to find this, like, the only thing we could think of was this brewery. And it worked. It worked fantastic, but it took like 5 minutes to like really get that to
it was a long time standing on the side of the mountain there. Cold.
Now, obviously, there's some caveats to this. First of all, you need to have cellular coverage, so Apple Maps can know that and actually have all that location. Second of all, it's only for Apple Maps and only for iPhone at this point. So there's no Google Maps support, nor is there any Android phone support. So do
we know if that's coming or?
There was no word at this point, but that's the specific at this point. So
it's kind of weird because in a lot of ways, like, the APIs and stuff for wearables are easier for companies like Garmin to implement on the Android side because of all the gates that are effectively garden walls that are in place on the Apple side. So this is actually one of the few scenarios where it's the opposite. So you think about pictures and stuff like that from an Apple, an iPhone don't show up on a Garmin watch, but they do from an Android phone.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. I would have to assume that's coming down the road. I think this is maybe just a first feature release, and then we'll go from there. Yeah,
cool.
Do you want to talk about so the one thing I briefly covered, but I didn't really cover it that much, was the automatic heart rate source switching. Is that something you want to cover, or do you want to like save that for like a post or something like that?
I'm going to save that for a post. It's cooler than people think.
Okay.
Good
teaser.
Good teaser. It's really interesting. It's one of those, I called it, like, this is in my mind a nuanced feature that other companies can't do because their list of to-dos is way too long, right?
They need to get fundamentals done first.
And this is one where, like, when you're at this stage of a company, this is true of Garmin or like Wahoo on the bike computers and others, where you can start doing like the quirky things that you're like, those sort of moments where like, wouldn't it be cool if it did this, right? And this is one of those moments where you're like, wow, that's cool. Like it saves people on edge cases. You almost never realize or care about it, but it's going to like improve data behind the scenes.
Okay, I don't think we actually talked about what it does though.
So what it does at a high level is detail. What it does at a high level is that if you have a chest strap on, a Garmin chest strap on with your watch, and you're doing something, it can look at that data stream and decide whether or not that chest strap data stream is better or worse than the optical heart rate sensor data stream. And so, examples would be typical fall running type scenarios where you're just starting off your run with a chest strap that maybe you have not moistened in some way, shape, or form. There's a pretty good chance the optical sensor will be more accurate for a lot of people than the chest strap in that first 5 to 7 minutes before there's some sort of moisture on you in a really cool running type scenario. Same is true for cycling downhill, right? Where you can get some like chest strap flap and stuff like that at high speeds. There's lots of scenarios like that, and essentially they're looking at the data accuracy in real time, and they will dynamically switch back and forth between which sensor they believe is the most accurate based on like electric signaling and stuff like that. It's super cool stuff, but I'm going to dive into how it works, whether or not it works well, if you can disable it, all that kind of fun stuff in a separate rabbit hole squirrel type post.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll save that for a different episode when we can talk about that in full, a lot more detail. Yeah. So next up, let's talk about Google/Fitbit's new Ace Kids smartwatch. I know nothing about this thing.
Yeah. So Fitbit has long had their Ace Kids activity trackers, and this is basically a LTE connected smartwatch version of that, roughly in the same ballpark as the Garmin Bounce LTE for kids, and a million other like Verizon, other branded by umpteen different carriers around the world, smartwatches that basically track where your kid is. And so their build is activity trackers, but for most parents, they're like, where's my kid tracker, right? It's LTE connected. All of them have pretty crappy battery life of like usually 1 to 2 days at best. They all tend to be really, really bulky. They all tend to be all the things that you and I would look at a watch and be like, that's horrific looking. But in this case, they're not. So they took essentially a Pixel 2 watch and just rebuilt it, but it's basically just Pixel 2 watch, as a kid's LTE tracker. So it's by far the slimmest and most sleek looking tracker out there. Downside, only gets 18 hours of battery life per day.
But that was similar to the original Pixel Watch.
It is, yeah. So, but like things got worse for the Pixel Watch 2, which is funny because they took a Pixel Watch 2 hardware. But what's interesting though is that they're gamifying everything towards activity. So their shtick is that they say they are building an activity tracker that is trying to be almost a gaming device for kids. And the first time I heard that as a parent, I'm like, oh, I don't need my kids more screen time. But they slowly won me around on this whole conference call that we had, because they went on to describe that the kid only gets the screen time and only like a minute or two if they go out and do activities. And so essentially they have to build up activity points, and they get like 1 or 2 moves in this little game. And then it's like, go get 3,000 steps.
So there's a reward system.
There's a reward system, and they have to do this, or it'll be like, go do 25 jumping jacks or whatever to get the next move. And so there's that portion of it. It's cool. There's a lot of other nuanced things that are definitely more advanced than any other company that we've seen do this in terms of kind of getting the kids really pulled into it. It's targeted at basically like 7 to 12 years olds roughly, but they said like, 5 and 6 year olds can do it just fine in many cases, depending on the kid, and some kids that are older like it. But their thing is like pre-phone, which you can have entire like parental debate on what the phone line is, but the point is this is supposed to be in the middle there. It's priced at $229, which is on the pricier end. For context, Garmin's Bounce is $149.
What's the subscription?
Subscription is $120 a year, which is also like more than like twice what Garmin's is roughly.
So, but does it have more functionality than Garmin Bounce?
Not Really, yes and no. So it does have support live calling. So Garmin Bounce only supports voice messages and text messages and emoji messages, as my kids love to send back and forth.
But live voice calling that's huge.
That's a big deal.
Huge.
It's huge. I think especially as the kids get a little bit older, like to be able to have that conversation. It hasn't honestly bothered my kids. They just send little voice messages. That's limited to 20 seconds, and it goes back and forth. But I totally get that. It's definitely a huge feature there, which might justify the double in price. That said, the $120 for the subscription, if you sign up essentially this summer, then you get half off for the first year. So there's like a bit of a carrot there. So it's $60 or so for the first year. Inversely, there's also some kind of quirky features that are missing. So there's no geofencing boundaries on the Fitbit one, where there is on Garmin and most other ones. So
but that could be something that's updated with software.
That definitely, I think it could be. And they talked about lots of things. Like people asked about what about music, and they had like the most coy yet not really hiding anything response of like, yes, that's a very interesting idea. Stay very well tuned.
Yeah, we will consider your request.
Yes. Should be out next week, right? Like it was basically like it's coming, but it's just not here today. And you can do contactless payments on it. So
I mean this is a Wear OS for watch.
It is,
Wear
except
OS.
you will never see Wear OS on it.
Okay.
So they said from the ground up, this is built as a kids tracker, assuming the ground was a Pixel 2 watch. But you will never see Wear OS in theory. And you and I will figure this out over the next few days, because I got 2 of them to try out. They only work in the US, which is, there we go. So this one, there's 2 different models. One called mild and one called spicy. So
I'm going to be getting the spicy.
Yeah, so we should switch.
Okay.
So you're spicy.
Okay.
And I'll bring these back and have my kids obviously go through them. I bought these, by the way, so these are I just bought them off of Amazon. And the downside is I needed to buy them here and get them activated here because once I leave the US, they won't work on LTE anymore. So again, another difference between them and Garmin. Garmin does work in the EU and a few other places, but this is only right now in the US. It does work on Wi-Fi, so my kids can basically go back and forth between Wi-Fi hotspots and work just fine, which is honestly good enough for most of what they need.
They're going to be like, this Fitbit Ace smells like Uncle Des.
It does. That's exactly what it's going to be like. So it'll be interesting to see these. I think it's cool. Pricing is a little bit premium for me, but there's a ton of other features we won't get into that I think are really cool what they've done here. So maybe it's worthwhile.
I mean, I guess the interesting thing would be to compare it to like the price of a smartphone, and because that's what I think a lot of parents probably try to use. I don't want to say for tracking, but to stay connected to their kids. So, compared to a smartphone, considerably less.
Yeah, I think it's less. I think it's still more expensive than like the Verizon plans. And I don't know the Verizon side, but if I look at like the Dutch plans anyways, where I live, that have kids trackers and things like that, it's definitely way more than that. And those do have voice calling on it. But those watches are like giant donuts on kids' wrists. They're so big and so clunky. And this is the size of a Pixel Watch. Like it's,
as we all know, it's tiny.
Now, before we get too far in the next topic, a brief note about fueling and hydration, but not this one here. Instead, about Precision Fuel and Hydration. They are the sponsor of this episode and the Fit File in general. And notably, I've been using their products for quite a while now, both myself and my wife. But of course, beyond us, there's also the Tour de France teams, a whole bunch of them, in fact, as well as the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, like you name it, a bunch of fast people, way faster than us, are using it. And what's cool about the product is that they have a bunch of smart people behind it. So it's not just the product which is really useful, but also all the smart people that'll help you with your race planning, like hydration, nutrition plans. So I mentioned in the last episode that I use their athlete support crew. So it's basically like you can set up a WebEx or a Zoom call with them, and you go ahead and walk through the event that you want to do, totally free, and they'll give you basically nutrition and fueling guidance, probably not including beer, but they will give that and help you kind of figure out what products you need for your particular event. And you're talking to real people, real sports scientists. It's super, super cool. But if people are not your thing, like talking to people are not your thing, they also have their entire race intake online planner. You can just do it yourself without having to actually communicate with someone. Note that all their products are Informed Sport certified, vegan, and 2-to-1 glucose fructose, and contain no artificial ingredients. And most importantly, as I always say, they are edible. I have no problems eating them. eat them on most of my rides and runs and crazy dumb adventures and stuff like that.
When there's not cookies involved.
Obviously, there's cookies today. So, I mean, there was a trade-off between cookies and gel. But I had the gel with me, so, that's what matters, right? Yeah. So I had the opportunity to do it. In any case, you can go ahead and visit the link down in the description right there. That link helps support us. And with that link and the coupon code FITFILE, you'll get 15% off your first order. Thanks again to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring today's episode.
Thanks, guys.
What do we got next?
Let's see here. I guess we can just quickly go through. So Wahoo came out with GoPro support for their bike computers, where you can basically control your GoPro from the head unit itself. This is, honestly, this is such a convenient feature, especially when you're cycling, just because, if your GoPro is on your handlebars, like underneath your stem or behind your seat, yes, it's really not that bad. Actually, just click the record button. It really isn't that bad, but still, it's a little bit precarious to kind of reach around there. And
it's also nice to be able to monitor whether or not it's recording quickly, because sometimes you put things in weird places. Like today, I had a GoPro in front of like the front gravel bag, right? Yeah. And it was like I couldn't actually see the lights. I just had to hope it was still recording.
Sure, yeah. And you can can you change modes and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, you can change modes. Okay. It's fairly basic. It depends on kind of GoPro's API, which isn't super awesome. We've seen other companies really struggle with this, and I haven't checked back in with the final implementation on Wahoo. I know when I first tried it out a few months ago in beta, it was a bit rough, and I don't know how much that's been solved, only because I've been getting questions the last 24 hours of people that are having problems with it on their Wahoo devices now that it's out.
So I tried to cover it.
Yeah.
And I was having some challenges, basically. Yeah. So it was, and I spoke to Wahoo directly about this, and apparently the challenges are behind how it connects to each GoPro, and that with the different versions, it can actually differ in terms of the reliability as well. So, when you go into the actual connections menu, you have a few different options to choose from. You have the Quick app, you have the Volta, you have the actual camera remotes from GoPro. But basically, they said that the Quick app is the most reliable connection for an external device, but they really had to play around with it quite a bit. And unfortunately, it wasn't super consistent for me. So I think that, that was beta firmware though. Yeah. So, I hope to revisit that and hopefully it's better.
I get the impression from talking to multiple companies that have tried the API, this is, if you look at the history of GoPro's API for controlling cameras, this is something that's been around for a decade. Basically behind the scenes, it's always there, it's always been neglected, and everyone's kind of been like, don't touch that stinky thing in the corner, right? And now companies are trying to touch a stinky thing in the corner, and they're running into these issues. And I know that GoPro and others are working directly with, Wahoo and others are working directly with GoPro to fix this. And they are making improvements there behind the scenes, but I think there's probably a point where GoPro needs to sort of not pause, but sort of look at it and go, how do we make a true API for third parties to control our cameras that gives them what those companies want and has room to grow, right? Room to have multi-camera control and all the things that the GoPro remote, that little button remote thing is great.
Oh, God, I love that thing.
Super reliable. It can control 5 cameras at once. That is amazing. I want that functionality, which is done via Bluetooth, just in bike computers and in maybe watches and things like that, using whatever native level, concrete goodness that is.
I guess it does fascinate me that the experience is so much different even between different GoPro versions, because I know that Wahoo is only supporting back to a certain, I think it was Hero 9.
Yeah, so 9, 10, 11, 12 are one API, except for 11 mini, which is
But that's different. But that's the thing. They're not going to be supporting Session or Max, apparently, just because something is weird with those. So, there's obviously some work on GoPro side of things that needs to happen there.
Yeah. So, and we've seen Coros actually implemented GoPro camera control a while ago, and it was the same story, right? There was just it was a whole bunch of voodoo to make things work well, to the point where you're like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah. So, and then next up, let's talk about, this is kind of an interesting thing. So, about a year ago, one of my old, a person that I used to work at a bike shop, 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. He reached out to me. He's like, hey, so, you know, I saw that you actually do like sports tech reviews and stuff like that. And he told me about this idea about basically a trainer bike or a trainer frame.
Yep.
So traditionally with a smart bike trainer, you need to put a bike on there, right?
Yep.
But at some point, a lot of people are going to ride inside so much consistently that, you know, taking their real bike on and off the trainer, that's a huge pain in the butt.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people like myself. I just ended up using one of my old road bikes, and that basically permanently lives on a trainer. Other people, like my friend, he actually went out and bought like a used frame and just kind of, you know, hodgepodge something together and kind of put it there. But so anyways, my friend's concept was to basically make a dedicated indoor bike frame that just sits inside, and hopefully cheaper than a traditional bike as well. Yeah. So that's, you know, that's kind of the hope. So yeah, it's a super interesting concept.
What's it called?
It's called their company's called CaveWorks, and the frame is called the Rivet.
Okay. No relation to the Rivet app that was a couple of years ago?
No, there's definitely no relation there. But yeah, it's basically like, you know, his brand new concept, I guess you could say. So anyways, he reached out to me about a year ago. I got to try his first prototype maybe like 6 months to 9 months ago. And it's basically this, like, I'll put the photo on the frame right now, or photo on the screen right now, but it's basically this like steel bike, or it's basically a steel frame. It doesn't have a front wheel or anything like that, but it's just made to
so how does it touch the ground? Like without a wheel, is it like
so there's basically 2 feet on the front end. Yeah, there's basically 2 feet on the front end, and the rest of it, it resembles a bike. You know, it has chain stays and seat stays and stuff like that. But, you know, it has some interesting geometry to it, which helps it actually accommodate a whole bunch of different body heights.
So is it adjustable in the same way a indoor smart bike would be, or is it more to be designed for one person?
No, it's definitely, I think, let's see here. He sent me over some details of it already, but I think something like, here we go. Something like 410 all the way up to 6.6. Okay. So that's a pretty big range. Yeah. And you'll see like the angles on the head tube and the seat tube, they may not be traditional because what it needs to do is obviously increase in length as it increases in height. Gotcha. Yeah, just because of top tube reach and stuff like that.
And for those non-Americans out there, 410 to 6'6" is short person, very short person to very tall person. So just taller than me and shorter than short.
Yeah, exactly. But, you know, so I think his idea behind this whole thing is, you know, some people may want to get a smart trainer, but again, they don't want to like deal with the kind of like back and forth sort of thing. So he kind of just wants to have something like he can just like pull something out of the box, mount it on a trainer, and then it's basically good to go. So
looking at the picture here, can that then go on a kicker climb with that sort of thing or not?
Yes.
Look at the extra. Oh wow, it's got a.
So basically, it's very interesting here where he made this in a fashion where there is a through axle through it, but it doesn't need a wheel. That's there for climb compatibility, actually. So, you know, obviously that'll depend on the trainer to make sure that you have a trainer that's, you know, gradient simulation compatible there. But yeah, it's actually going to be kicker climb compatible as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In different colors or just the one beige color?
So yeah, I think this is their concept color. Okay. Again, I'll have a photo on the screen right now. So it wasn't what I was expecting, I guess you could say, for an indoor bike like this. Yeah. However, this actually reminds me of like wood or bamboo or something.
It does look very bamboo-y.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before I zoomed in on it, I thought it was bamboo, but now I see it's
and which I think is kind of novel. I don't know.
Be interesting.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, you know, adjustable reach and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But so anyways, again, you know, being like a complete like out of the box solution, right?
Yeah.
This is going to come in a few different configurations. So he's actually going to have it in a complete, he's going to have it in like a complete single speed version that can be used with like virtual shifting type stuff. And then he's going to have a completely geared setup as well. Okay. So like you can, you know, it'll come with the rear derailleur, the shifters, all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Again, so you just like, it's pretty much you pull it out of the box,
on any trainer then, as opposed to like the single speed with the virtual cog, virtual shifting. That would effectively just be Wahoo's trainers or whatever else.
Well, and only works with Zwift, right? At the moment.
In the moment,
No, so he's definitely offering like a few different options there, which is pretty cool. I think he's going to offer a frame as well. But so anyways, I think it's fantastic concept for sure, which I think will solve a lot of issues for a lot of people who want a permanent indoor bike setup. I mean, but obviously the kicker was something like this. Wait, pun intended.
Yeah.
I think I used that in my another video.
But so easy all the time.
Yeah, no. The kicker is going to be the price, and so it's like you can go buy a used bike on Craigslist or something like that. Like I think I was telling you like the other day, I got a killer deal on this bike for $800. Right. Full bike. And
especially right now at the current state of the bike industry.
Exactly. So there is the current state of the bike industry where, it's like you can, and that's the thing is that I know that's why I got this bike so cheap. It's like a $2,500 bike that's the use is like brand new. Yeah. So
we were playing a game in Des's garage of when was the last time he'd actually ridden each bike that he had.
I get my favorites. Like I love bikes, but I get my favorites, and I just end up riding those more than anything else. So that's going to be a big factor for the success of something like this to make sure that it's cheap enough. But on the flip side, me buying that one bike, well, that's made for me.
Yeah.
This thing can be used with
anyone.
Yeah, anyone. So,
no, I think it's a concept. It's definitely a strong concept. Ultimately, all the stuff comes down to the price.
Yeah.
Is it competitive with what people can cobble together themselves, or does it have a ease of use advantage over that, right?
Totally,
And again, you can be slightly more expensive than a single frame if you're going to go ahead and have multi-user scenarios and stuff like that figured out.
The reason he just sent this information over to me because it's pretty much imminent that he's gonna start pre-orders on it.
Cool.
So I don't know, I think he's gonna get me one like next week or something like that, like nice. A full production one,
Final one,
for me to actually get on and review and stuff like that. So
cool.
Look for that coming soon. So,
awesome.
Yeah,
good deal.
Totally.
Sweet.
So is that our list for today?
We got one more.
Okay. Oh yeah. So anyways, we are headed to WWDC tomorrow evening.
So what is that? So WWDC, for folks that don't know,
Worldwide Developer Conference for Apple.
It's essentially when Apple each year in June announces all of these software side changes for their different platforms. So for iPad, for macOS, for iPhone, for watchOS, for tvOS, for every one of their devices, they have a platform behind it. And this is when they announce all of the new software features for that. And sometimes that gives a bit of a precursor, prelude, whatever, to what happens in September, which is when they announce all their new hardware. And there are also sometimes in these June events where they announce new hardware as well. But setting that aside, new watches and new phones come out, generally speaking, in September, and whatever else. But this kind of sets the stage for that. And we can still see new features on new watches in September that weren't seen here.
Actually, we oftentimes do.
We often do. But we're going to see like 90% of the new features that will be on new watches in September will be announced at WWDC.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting strategy, right?
Yeah.
To announce their new software before their new hardware.
Yeah. And the reason for that is because they want to ultimately get developers to ensure compatibility before September. So whether it's watch, and in particular really iPhone, to make sure that, when September comes, that's the new version of software that'll be delivered with those watches and phones. And so they want to ensure that apps are compatible, that there's no bugs. And so this essentially, Apple gets 3 or 4 months worth of free testing effectively from the entire world on this. And so typically they'll announce these things on Monday at WWDC, and then immediately, within a few hours, those with developer accounts can download those software updates and start playing with them. And then they're available to the general public starting usually early July-ish, roughly around then. And then the general public can just download them for free and give them a whirl. And that's usually the best place to enter that new beta software sort of thing.
I think it's always an interesting strategy by Apple that, it's generally just pretty big announcements only a handful of times a year, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they don't, what would it be like? Software features, I would say 2 big ones most of the time.
Yeah.
And, I'm probably more specifically talking about watch at this point. Like 2 big software releases, and then obviously just 1 big hardware release, each year. So I don't know. It's a very interesting strategy, compared to other companies that are out there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, this is... And the thing to keep in mind, too, is what they announced in that keynote, that 2.5 hour long keynote, is only like scratching the surface of all the features that are new. They just can't simply fit, right? They could stand up there and they do. They literally have keynotes for the next 2 days, not keynotes. They have sessions for the next 2 days talking about all the other new features. But what you're basically going to see is the highliner features, or the big features announced in the keynote, and then we will start digging into all the other cool things that are there. That's like, oh, this is cool, or this needs tweaking. And to Apple's credit, they have tweaked a lot after they announced. Like, I think triathlon was such a good example of this. When they rolled out the triathlon support a couple of years ago, there was some weird quirks, like you couldn't manually advance segments. You had to use auto triathlon only. And as I showed in a triathlon, that didn't quite work. So it was one of those, like, they do a good job of taking that feedback in, especially in that first, I would argue, really in that first 2 months. Like June and July is when they have the most flexibility to do that.
Sure.
But it'll be interesting to see what happens, especially on the watchOS side.
All right, so I think we should just talk about something a little saucy. Let's talk about predictions really quick. So so from my point of view, so I really liked it last year that they focused a lot on cycling.
Sure.
Really, really like that. They had a lot of enhancements there. And then I believe the year before was a lot surrounding navigation as well.
Running especially in triathlon, all that stuff.
Yeah, I think so. They really highlighted a lot of navigation features, like, their Compass app that had like the backtrack feature with like elevation and stuff like that. But it wasn't like married with maps, and like that always like that. I really want.
There was vague connectivity there, but it was like.
So this is not really a prediction, but that's a want from my end of things. Like, I just want those things to be married together a little bit better. Yeah, I
think in my mind that is the most likely of scenarios to finally see. So like the Apple Watch has navigation-ish stuff using maps, but it's like point-to-point navigation. You can't, like, natively anyways, you can't load a route into it. Like, can't load a Strava route into the Apple Watch natively. You can use third-party apps to do this kind of stuff, but that usually has a battery hit and all sorts of other stuff. So nonetheless, I would like to see, last year we also saw, remember, training API integration.
Oh, yeah.
So we saw Training Peaks and all those other platforms. There's tons of platforms now that use that. I want to see that exact same thing for navigation. So I want to see the ability on an Apple Watch to be able to push a Strava route, a Komoot route, a route with GPS route, or pick whatever provider you want for mapping. Maybe even get real saucy and allow GPX files, right, or something like that to be pushed into it, and to be able to do proper navigation with proper offline maps on the watch. Like, if they do that, to me, that is a huge win for Apple in the kind of sports endurance hiking kind of realm.
So almost all other more sports-focused watch manufacturers have some sort of, route import feature and navigation feature, whether that's breadcrumb or like full-blown maps or something like that. But the process to get the routes onto the device actually differ quite a bit, from device manufacturer to device manufacturer. And that's where, with Apple, they always do things a very certain way, right? There's always a very...
As Training API showed.
Yeah, there's a very particular way things will happen. And, thinking about that, I truly don't know, like, how they would do that. I mean, maybe like the native share function or something like that from another app but yeah, I think
they're going to have to do just an API just like Training API, right? So like, and the challenge with Training API is that in Apple-like way, right? It made it very easy for the end user in the sense that if the end user had a Training Peaks account or end user had a Trainer Road account, link the two up and magically the stuff shows up on your watch, right? That worked out great. The problem with that, as I think both Apple and every other company out there would admit, I know all the other companies admit this, and I think Apple kind of admits this as well, is that was a very rough process from a development standpoint. Like in the sense that Apple chose what was best for the consumer, but in doing so, they made a lot of really hard trade-offs for those companies and integrations. And those companies really struggled with that integration for most of the fall last year. And I would argue some of them still struggle with that today, and getting those workouts properly into the Apple ecosystem. And that has gotten better. But I'm hoping that if Apple were to do a navigation sort of API, routes API, whatever they want to call it, I'm hoping they learned from that experience and made it easier, right? So companies couldn't just deliver a simple fit file structure workout, which is how every other platform out there. Like if you look at a Garmin watch, a Coros watch, anything, any device that we review today, those workouts are delivered from Training Peaks in fit files. Like that is the industry standard across the board. In Apple's case, they chose their own formatting process, which these companies struggled with. We know on the navigation side, those predate even the structural workout side well before that, right? GPX, KML, even fit file stuff, like all that stuff's been around for 10, 15 years. So I'm hoping if Apple does this, again, who knows, but hoping if they do, they make it easy for these companies so we can see greater adoption sooner for this kind of stuff.
Now, I think one thing that a lot of us have been wanting for a while too is like some sort of training feedback, sort of situation. I don't know. I actually don't see something like that yet on an Apple Watch. I think, again, it kind of almost goes back to, Apple wants to do things, implement it a very particular way. I don't know. Like I feel like there's some other things that need to be built out first before that actually would be implemented.
Yeah, it'd be tricky. I know. I mean, there were like Bloomberg leaks, I think almost 2 years ago now, about them having an entire like Whoop-like platform, right? Yeah. And maybe we will show up on Monday and find a Whoop-like platform. I do tend to agree that I think I would love to see that. I think that'd be amazing to see that. It'd be interesting. The real question if we see that is subscription or not subscription. My bet is subscription. My bet is it's tied to the same thing as like Fitness Plus or something like that.
Sure. I think that from where the Apple Watch is right now, where it is very capable to put, that's a big jump. That's a huge jump to actually implement something like that. And again, it's like, I think Apple, when they do implement something, they think about it a lot. So
undoubtedly, I think all of our conversations that we've had with Apple behind the scenes have illustrated they think about this stuff a lot. And it's always consumer first, right? As we just talked about, like it's always consumer first. And that works out the vast majority of the time. So there's a lot to think about in that physiometric sort of realm to get there.
I think either way, though, whatever they do announce for Watch, I think it generally, you can sort of make some predictions sometimes on the hardware based on what's happening with the watch.
Definitely, And this year would be the Apple Watch Series 10, right? The 10th. Not technically anniversary, but effectively the 10th edition of the Apple Watch. So it'll be interesting to see if that would be September again, not this week. But that would be assumedly a September timeframe. So it'll be interesting to see if they go big or go home there, or what the thinking is.
I don't know. I think it's a big year of opportunity for like quite a few companies, like Google, obviously, Samsung with their new Ring, which you should check out Ray's article on the Ring as well, and then Apple as well, because last year was a funky year, I guess you could say, especially with the blood oxygen sensor.
Definitely. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's always interesting to go to those events and like get to talk to tons of geeks, both external people that are there, because normal developers can basically like put an entry in to try to go to WWDC, and there's like thousands of people there, and so to be able to get there, to go there for a normal developer, however you want to phrase that, is kind of a highlight. And so it's cool to talk to lots of people in the industry there, and also cool to talk to a lot of the Apple developers themselves behind the scenes, right?
Totally.
Like to be able to kind of have those chats on super deep technical things and understanding why things are the way they are. Like my mantra since the very beginning for DCRainmaker.com is that I want to understand, like if I'm going to criticize a product for not having a feature or doing a feature a stupid way or whatever the case is, I'd love to talk to the developers and understand why they did the thing they did the way they did, right? And most of the times, there's a very good answer for that, right? And very rarely is it marketing stuff. Like people always assume it's marketing. Very rarely it's marketing. Very rarely there's either a technical blocker or a limitation of time or complexity or keeping it simple for end users and all that kind of stuff. So it's always interesting to chat with those sort of people.
I think, we've had actually plenty of discussions about that exact topic in terms of like, why features are the way they are, or why maybe like one example actually was we were talking about like why there are so few third-party Wear OS watches out there.
Yeah.
And we'll save that topic for a different day.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good one. Yeah, for sure. So
good example of that.
Yeah, so anyways, I think beer's running out here.
Getting down the bottom,
Yep, absolutely. And so, but the next couple episodes are going to be I think going to be really cool episodes. So
got some cool stuff planned, some cool people.
Yeah, we have a very special guest on one of our next episodes, which will be fun. We'll be talking about Apple again, and June's just a very busy month.
Yeah, hold on to your hats here, folks, because it's gonna get spicy.
Yep, exactly. All right, so stay tuned for the next episode. Reminder about where you can get the podcast and where you can listen to it and stuff like that. You got this nailed.
I've got this nailed. Yep. So you can find the podcast on Spotify as well as Apple Podcast and on YouTube Music or YouTube itself. The cool part about YouTube Music is that you can go back and forth between the YouTube video and the podcast side seamlessly, audio only or video only.
Yep, cool. All right, and we will see you in the next episode. So we should put our watches back on now.
Oh yeah, good point.